we're going to talk about build to sell, building your business into an asset of value, specifically centered around a South African scenario, the South African economy, the South African challenges that we have. The reason I say that is because we work actively across the US, the UK, and the EU too, and we have clients in all those regions. The dynamics are slightly different. The attitude of American companies, especially earlier stage businesses, is a build to sell mentality almost immediately. In Europe, it's about second, third, fourth, 15th, 20th, 30th generation succession. And yeah, it is funny. Neil, you know what? We have a client in Germany, 17 generations, 17 generations, dealing with the baggage of culture in that family context alone makes it very, very interesting. And then in the UK, it's pure opportunism. The British have always been very opportunistic. They remain very opportunistic. And that drives decisions on whether they're building for next level growth or building to exit. So let's begin. I'm going to be asking you some questions. And I would love to see you please come through on the chat. Send me your views, send me your thoughts, but write this down for yourself. What is your final destination? In your business, what is your final destination? Think about it for a moment. Think about it seriously. What is your final destination? There are many different paths you can go. There are many different places you can go to. What's your final destination? I had an uncle. He started his last business when he was 87, and he never managed to sell it. He died at 92, but literally he died behind his desk. He loved business, just loved it, loved the thought of it, loved the idea of it. So his final destination was, I guess one would say, a closure more than anything else. But what is your final destination? If you thought about that for a moment, let me ask you this, right now, snap, what is your business worth? If I knocked on your door to acquire your business, Michael, what's your price? I'm in the market. I'm in the market. You're at your desk, I'm in the market. I'm stepping in to buy your business today. What's your price? How do you calculate that price? How do you come to that number? What drives that number for you? Is it where you want it to be? Do you know what the price of your business is? And is it where you want it to be? Or is there some work that needs to be done? And then the final question I'm putting to you is, how much time do you spend in your business? Okay, so guys, do this. I hope everyone's got a calculator handy. How many hours a day do you work? So there are, let's say feasibly there's 16 hours of work you could do in a day. How many hours of work do you do in a day? How many days a week are you working? So take the number of hours you work on an average day, and the best way to figure this out is you've got your 5 working days and you've got 2 weekends. So average it out. Let's say it tallies up to about 7 hours across 7 days. So it's a 50-hour week or a 60-hour week. There are weeks in a month, 4.2 weeks in a month. So tally that up as well. And then how many years have you been at it? So if you've been building your business over a 20-year period, it approximates more or less about 40,000 hours of energy, effort, and work. Give me a thumbs up if you've done the numbers. Okay, so in the chat, Neil, in the chat, how many hours? How many hours, mate? How long have you been at it? How many hours have you invested so far? Send through your calculations in the chat. 32,760. Okay, that's a good punt. It's a good effort so far. Who's topping that? 30,000 hours, Melania, yeah, not bad. Who's early in the business? Alan, how many hours? Bertus, have you run your numbers? You almost look like an accountant, and I don't mean that in a negative way. How many hours? Okay, Dominique, 73,500. Steve, 63,000. Okay, so I want to share an idea with you. We spend an enormous amount of time building our businesses. Based on all the transactions that I've certainly witnessed and been involved in, and based on all the transactions, Johan on the screen, one of my partners as a business broker has been involved in, people sell their businesses in an investment that takes between 30 to 60 hours. So it takes 30,000 hours, 40,000, 50,000 hours to build the business, and the transaction takes place in anywhere between 30 to 60 hours. And that's really about finding a broker or finding a buyer, preparing an information memorandum, debating your valuation, getting all upset, poring over the legal contracts. That's how quickly it gets sold. 15, 20, 30 years to build, and a mere 60 hours to do the transaction. And that's where the problems begin, because none of us build with the view to sell. Most of us emerge into our businesses out of interest, out of necessity, out of opportunity. And mostly we see the value that we are creating as that final moment, because we all still fundamentally, as entrepreneurs, believe in an optimistic, bright, creatable future. So we pour most of what we have into our businesses, saying everything will be okay, because of a day I will sell it, and that'll be my wealth creating opportunity. So let's talk about that. Here are the stats, global stats. Success in sale of a business, 94.6% fail to sell. They close at an enormous cost to the business owner, to the family of the business owners, the staff, the customers, the suppliers, and quite honestly, the community that they operate in. Every time a business closes down, yes, others emerge, of course. But every time a business closes down, it removes the vibrancy out of the economy itself. Within succession, and by succession, there are two types of succession. We've got family succession, where the founding generation brings in the succeeding generation, typically kids or family members. And then we have succession, especially in the professional services environment, in the shape of MBOs, management buyouts. And succession is often seen as a way to realize an exit for the founders because the business itself is not immediately sellable. When we look at these numbers, 27%, especially in the family instance, of businesses that move from founders to successors survive. Only 5.4% to the second generation, 3.2% to the third generation. And that makes this one business we work with in Germany, 17 generations strong. 17 generations strong. An anomaly, but not. Because that business has no more family members in it. It's a 17-generational business, but the family members have all moved out. These are the global stats. And it's a pretty scary number. So let's try and understand why. There are 5 questions that need to be answered if you want to get a build to sell proposition right. The first one is, what makes you special? What makes your business special? So just jot down somewhere a little note to self, what you believe makes your business special. You can also send it through in the chat. Be good for me to know. Mike Woodruff, wow, 96,000 hours. You're an obsessive compulsive perfection disorder person, just like me. I relate, I connect, I identify with you on that. What makes you special? The next question is, how far into the future, if I came to knock on your door to buy your business today, how far into the future would you be able to show me your business can continue to generate revenues? Is it a month? Is it 6 months? Is it a year, 3 years, 5 years, 10 years? When this guy, where is he? When this fellow here, who knows a thing or two about valuation, did the valuation on Coca-Cola, Warren Buffett, he thought that Coca-Cola had built a business that could survive 38 years into the future. So where are you on your timeline? Once you've done that, it's not about turnover. Because if I'm buying, I'm saying, if your business can go for 3 years into the future or 1 year into the future, whatever that number is, on a month-to-month basis, how much cash does it spit out? This is what's referred to almost as an EBITDA number. But if we look money in, money out, money left, so not quite EBITDA. It's almost like the Greek cafe owner mentality. Money in, money out, money left in the till at the end of the day. The end of the day, how much money is left in the till? Over the period that you can forecast your revenues on a month-to-month basis, how much free cash does the business produce? Third to last question, what do you do? David, what is your role in your business? What do you do? And Bertus, how do you spend your time in your business? And then I would be asking you, who would stay and who would go? Because all of you have built teams. All of you have built teams. Steve, who would stay and who would go? And then the last question I've got for you is, do you understand the mathematics? Because valuation is not a feeling. Valuation is mathematical. There's a very, very good reason. There's a very good reason why people invest or buy and people don't. When it comes down to it, in that final moment, if the mathematics is solid, it represents 80% of the value you would get. The remaining 20% is the packaging that you put around the business and how you sell it. So these are the 6 questions, 5 questions to value, 1 question on mathematics that we're going to answer in the next half hour. Let's start. In order to create some objectivity and some distance from our very own businesses, right? Let's talk about a metaphor, an analogy. Because if we can relate to the analogy, we don't take anything personally and it gives us some objectivity. Building a business is no different to sailing a ship, and it applies to all of us, irrespective of what sector or industry we're in. We all sail in an open ocean, that's the economy. We all depart, hopefully with a purpose, or did we? When we started our businesses, did we depart saying, what is the destination we want to arrive at? When you're sailing a ship, you really need to be clear on your destination. If you decide you're sailing from Durban to Hong Kong, It's a 12-day journey. You depart with purpose. You know how to navigate to get to Hong Kong. And most importantly, depending on your purpose, you're going to design your ship. The hull of your ship needs to be designed to get you there. In every ship, you have an engine room, which sits below decks. It's a dark, dingy place. And the engines churn to give you propulsion. And every ship has a bridge, which is at the top. And the bridge is there to give you direction. You've got instruments, you can see where you're going. It's a fantastic place to be. Every ship needs a crew. And what's incredible about ships' crews is that their roles are very, very well defined. And most importantly, on every ship, every crew member knows exactly what to do, when to do it, and how to do it. Because when you're sailing out at sea and you hit a storm, every member of that crew needs to know exactly what to do to get you to the other side of that storm. So I'm going to use this analogy as we talk through how to build a business that of a day can put you in the 5.4% of businesses that get successfully sold. And let's start on that destination. If you think about what is buyable, what is sellable, it's no different to thinking about your business as an investment on the stock exchange. You find a share you want to invest in. What do you want from that share? You want the share, firstly, to generate income growth. We call those dividends. So you buy a share for 50 bucks. You want the share to produce a dividend of 10 Rand a year. And over a period of time, you want to see the dividend amounts grow. The second thing is you want to see the share grow its capital value. If you buy it for 50 bucks, you hope to sell it for 150 bucks down the line. And the third thing that makes that share tradable is that the share can be bought and sold. So if you think about your businesses like one would think about an investment on the stock exchange, the mind space around building to sell starts featuring and becoming right. The big problem, of course, is how do we measure capital growth? How do we ensure income growth? And most importantly, how do we ensure tradability? So Dominique, I don't know you from nothing, but I'm guessing, Bright Spark Tutors, I'm guessing there's an enormous amount of passion that's gone into building that business. If that business relies on you on the day you wish to sell it, it's not a saleable business. It's not an asset. And you always find yourself getting caught betwixt and between the two. You're passionate about the business you build. You believe in the product you offer. You see the impact you're delivering, but yet it can't be about you and it can't center on you. So the way we define that future, that destination that you should be sailing to, is a business that's built on the back of what we'd call an asset of value. And an asset of value has got 5 features to it. The first is it has brand positioning. And I'm going to talk about each of these in a bit more detail. Next, it has a system of delivery. And by systems, I'm talking business systems, not technology systems. Eventually, business systems can be turned into technology systems. Team members, you've got the right crew. And your crew know exactly what to do, when to do, and how to do it. You've got time on the bridge so you can focus on growth. And the best time to sell a business is when you're growing, because that future forecast that the investor would look to find will see the growth in the future based on the growth in the past. If you haven't had any growth before you sell, then how do you forecast growth in order to increase the valuation and convince me, the buyer, that I'm buying an asset that has income growth and capital growth baked into it because of what you've done in the past? And then finally, it needs to be a business that's sellable. And that means it needs to be a business that absolutely does not rely on you. We call that an asset of value. And from an Auric perspective, we profoundly believe it should be the purpose behind the passion of why you do what you do. Building your business to meet these 5 requirements is as essential as believing in what you do, mobilizing a team behind what you do, and making that business happen. One without the other simply does not work. So let's talk about brand positioning, the first feature of an asset of value. That's all about responding to a competitive, noisy business environment. And that means, from a ship perspective, you're built for purpose. My big contention with this is many, many years ago, we were told, if you build a better mousetrap, the world will beat a path to your door. And that was written and penned in 1771 by Ralph Waldo Emerson, who was one of the founding fathers of the United States. And in 1771, he was right, because there were no products around. So any person who had a product, well, basically you had a market. There were no fridges. Electricity was in its earliest iteration. There certainly weren't any cars. It was just wild. It was a completely insane environment. Build a better mousetrap and the world will beat a path to your door. In 1922, Henry Ford built an entire business around the concept of an affordable, reliable product called the Model T Ford. In the late 60s and early 70s, Philip Kotler turned around and said, no, it's not about products. It's absolutely not about products. It's all about segments. Now, all of us on this screen fall into a similar segment. We are called by the banks, for example, SMEs. And I promise you, David, I don't know you. Bertus, I don't know you. Michael, I don't know you. Lucien, I know you. I'm watching you. I know you. I know you. I'm watching you. But I can promise you our needs are profoundly different from each other. We're in businesses, we might be of a certain similar size, but because we're in different sectors, because we're in different industries, because we have different intentions, because we are at different stages of our lives and different stages of our growth, we are SMEs, but what do we have in common? And when you wonder why you don't get good response from big organizations that use segmentation as a way to define how they provide value to you, it's because they don't understand us. Certainly what we have seen consistently is what wins in a positioning environment is having a very clear sense of who you serve, giving them definition, understanding them, and understanding them in the context of two things. In offering the service or products that you offer, what problem do you solve for them? And what experience do they want to learn about you, to engage with you, and to acquire the solution that you offer through a product or service that gets their problem solved? It's the new area of specialization. And it is the area that distinguishes growth within the SME environment. We live and operate in a very, very competitive place and space. If we don't define ourselves by who we serve, and rather define ourselves by the service we offer, or the product we offer, or the price we have, it's simply not sustainable. Because in the instance where your product is the best, give it a week, give it 6 weeks, give it a month, give it 6 months, give it a year. Any smart competitor out there will have a product as good, if not better. We've already seen the early stages of Elon Musk's car being competed with. It's coming out of Volkswagen, it's coming out of Audi, it's coming out of Porsche, it's coming out of BMW. Hydrogen cars are new alternatives. The product advantage is only there for a short period of time, and then the market always catches up. But if you understand who you serve, and you can connect and resonate with them on a profoundly intellectual as well as emotional level as an audience, it means that whenever you try and reach them with your communications, they will connect to that messaging. When you engage them with your offer, they will understand and resonate and connect to that offer. And when you talk about how you can improve the quality of their lives, be it individuals or businesses, they will recognize that you understand the problem that they experience and see how in what you do, you can get that solved. It is the point of competitive distinction. Brand positioning, that's what it's all about. The experience with which you resonate with me, relate to me, connect with me, and remove my problem. The next part of the asset of value is the system of delivery. So if I understand who I serve as a business, and I understand how they behave, and I understand what problem they have that I can solve, and most importantly, I understand what experience they want in order to learn about me, marketing, engage with me, sales, and remove my problem, which is operational fulfillment, in a manner that's frictionless, administration. Those 4 areas make up the system of delivery. And a system in any business sense is a set of activities in a sequence that can be measured and most importantly can be taught. We recently published a book called Sweat Scale Sell. And in that book, we write extensively about Jack the Baker, one of our very, very first clients. A 54-year-old man who I'd met 13 years ago, more or less, doing an annual revenue of around 50-odd million rand. And 13, 14 years on, that business now does over R1 billion worth of revenues. And one of the most fundamental points of growth acceleration for that business was suddenly understanding that he had nothing, his business had nothing to do with the croissants or the baked products. It had everything to do with understanding who he needs to talk to, how he needs to send a message to them, how he needs to engage with them in order for them to come on board. Activities in a sequence that can be measured and can be taught. The function of marketing is to generate leads. The only leads you're interested in are those that you have chosen to serve. The communications you send out, a message sent through a platform at a particular point in time that can be measured and evaluated for its effectiveness, is a marketing system. You might use social media, you might use events, you might use door-to-door selling. There are a whole lot of different platforms you could utilize. All of those get determined by who you serve. When they open their doors to you and you engage with those clients, the way that you ask questions demonstrates your understanding of their reality and what problems you solve for them. That's what builds trust in the selling process. The way you then service and provide your offerings in itself is a system. Here's a simple example. COVID has disrupted the world. If I have a burst geyser and I have my parents living in my home with me, and my parents are vulnerable people during the COVID period, and I go and I find 2 plumbers and I evaluate guesswork that both of them have the technical capability to solve the burst geysers. And the one says, well, Pavlo, we'll come to your house, we will walk through the door, stomp around, climb into the ceiling, fix the geyser, and stomp out your house. And because of the type of geyser you have, I'll have 5 people in that process. And the other says, Pavlo, we'll come to your house. Because we're aware of COVID-related issues, we will enter the roof via the tiles, we will fix the geyser, close up the tiles, and exit again. That's what I mean by an experience. And in both those instances, activities in a sequence that can be taught and measured. That is what fulfillment, operational fulfillment is all about. So if I can get lead generation in a system, because I know who I serve and I know what message they want to hear from me, I can get lead conversion, sales in a system, and I can measure it, and I can get operational fulfillment done into a system that creates the experience I promised in lead generation. activities in a sequence that can be measured and can be taught. It sets me up for the most fundamental elements of creating scale in my business. And that is finding the right people to do the right thing at the right time. All of us have employed people before. How do you do it? Who over here has the magic ability to look at a CV, look at all the bullet points about the remarkable skills and capabilities of the incumbent employee in front of you, who, if you believed everything on that CV, you would think this individual could build the Mars Intercept station for Elon Musk single-handedly, because they've built billions of businesses, or they've generated billions in revenues, and they are profoundly most remarkable people in the world. So I haven't managed to figure that out yet. I don't have the ability to read a CV and evaluate it on that basis. When you build an asset of value, for so long as you know exactly who you need to serve and how to solve problems for them through an experience you want to create, and then you build systems to market, to sell, to fulfill, immediately when you look to get the right team on board, now you can evaluate someone based on the activity set to market, activities in a sequence that can be measured. Very quickly, I can ask you questions around certain of the activities and learn whether you've done them before and to what degree you yourself led or drove those activities. Outside of that, I'm not even that concerned. Because when I look at the CV now, I'm looking to find someone who is a good cultural and values fit with my organization. As employers, all of you, without any question of doubt, one of the most frustrating things is when you get people on board into your business that don't share your passion, your belief, your drive, your energy. It happens to all of us, without a doubt. And I think employing people on the back of their values is far more valuable than employing people on the back of a very impressive CV. If I build my business into an asset of value, I have that opportunity. Because remember, what we're looking for are not job opportunities for people. We are looking for system operators. I'm employing you, Soren, in sales. I have my activities in a sequence that can be measured. Because I've tested it myself, and because I've built it myself, when I employ you, I can measure you and train you immediately on the activities in a sequence that can be measured. And ladies and gents, I'll tell you something amazing about all of us. When we as individuals, as part of the human race, as this species, find work that we can perform well at, it builds our confidence, it builds our interest, it builds our enthusiasm, it motivates us because we can see that we are performing well. We can see the contribution we make to something bigger than just our jobs, which is the organization itself. When people perform well at work, people blossom and flourish. And if you find the right person to do the right thing, because you've understood what you're looking for when you employ people and when you allocate responsibility to people, and you can match their skills, their cultures, their culture, their values to the function of work that you want them to perform, they flourish and blossom in that sense. There's a second reason this is important, folks, and that is you want to find yourself in a situation as a business owner that you don't have a rock star. And a rock star is that person who comes and works in your business that you in the back of your head say, wow, without Grant, I could be in trouble. How do I keep Grant happy? How do I fall over myself to make sure Grant stays? And all of a sudden, Johan, Alex, and Monet experience a different level of engagement with you to the way that Grant does. It does not create for a happy environment from a culture point of view in a business. And culture in a business really does matter, because when someone buys the business, in many ways, yes, they're buying your positioning, they're buying your systems, but importantly, they're buying the systems operators too. They're buying that team. So what does that do? We've got positioning right. We know who we are. We know what we stand for. We know what makes us special. We've now built systems to deliver on that positioning, the promise we've made to our groups of customers that we've chosen to serve. We've got the right system operators on board. What does it do for you? Michael, what if people stepped into your business and they were greeted in a very particular way? They were seated in a very particular way. They were engaged with in a very particular way, all driven by system. They then had their wishes fulfilled in a very particular way. And you had the ability to measure whether that was so or not. What it does mean, folks, is that you spend less and less and less and less time in the engine room of your ship. You spend less time worrying about propulsion, and it gives you more time to get onto the bridge. Because when you get onto the bridge of your ship, you have all the instruments you need to see if the systems are working. You know exactly where your crew are and what they're doing. You have the ability to navigate from where you are to that destination over a period of time. One of the biggest challenges, once you have built the system of delivery and a good team in place, is where do you find growth that increases turnover, but not your operating overheads? Because to get good valuations for business, remember the third piece. The third piece, what makes you special? Positioning. What will allow you to demonstrate to me that you can exist for 3, 4, 5 years into the future? Systems and people. What generates that free cash? It's strategic growth opportunities. And for all the years that I've been working with business owners, there's not one business owner that I've come across that doesn't have the nous, the sense of exactly where to find it and where to look for that strategic growth. So why don't most of us? Because we are stuck in the engine room. You cannot chase the real next level growth in your business if you are spending time day in and day out in the operational aspects or the engine room of your business. It's simply not possible. When I knock on your door to buy you, it's one of the things I certainly evaluate and test. Because why would I want to be buying a job in an engine room? So why now? Why is it a good time now to get your heads around build to sell? Let's talk a little bit about the economic cycle. Firstly, the South African economic cycle is irrelevant to all of us. If we were very large businesses, if we were corporate entities, then without country growth, without GDP growth, we simply can't grow. For the last 5 years, all our corporate clients, what do they do at the beginning of every financial year? Reset strategy for a challenging environment. What do they then do for 12 months after they've reset the strategy? They restructure their businesses. And whilst you're busy restructuring, how do you implement the strategy? Because you've got to restructure before you can implement. Then the end of the year comes. What do they do again? They go and they get all the big consultancies, Ernst & Young and Deloitte and McKinsey and KPMG, to say, gosh, we need a new strategy. because we never grew last year. They forget they had a strategy, but they were so busy restructuring that nobody could implement. So at the beginning of the next year, they reset strategy. And then they spend 12 months restructuring. Big businesses can't grow in no growth economies. Very small businesses struggle to simply survive. And when I look at everyone on the screen, and when I look at the messaging I got in relation to the hours partners have spent on their businesses, the fact that you have a hand on your business, the fact that you yourself can make decisions and change direction as and when you require, makes this mid-tier SMEs, which is what we all are, the most flexible to be able to adapt to changes in circumstances. Last year, our clients averaged a 29.8% compound annual growth. That is a business that doubles every 2 years and 2 months, more or less. 2 years and 3 months. And the reason for it is that in this no growth economy, they found growth by eating the lunch of their big corporate competitors. They found growth by outcompeting their own mid-tier competitors who had not set their minds on a growth strategy. They found growth because when you work with us, it's the only option. Everything we do with you is orientated around growth. And growth comes from strategy and implementation, but it also comes from the way you choose to look at your business. Because the attitude we hold is the reality that we experience. Historically, markets recover 60% of their value within 6 months of a slump. Globally already, markets have recovered. And if you look at what's going to be happening globally now, in order to recover economies, governments are going to be dropping interest rates, you've seen it here, and they're going to be flushing an enormous amount of cash into the economy to kickstart economies again. We've secured the IMF loan. It will start translating through. The opportunities for all of us over here is that the very big corporate entities, which are measured from quarter to quarter to quarter to quarter, those CEOs are going to be looking for growth. And in a no-growth economy, they're going to find it through acquisitions of companies like ours. The time to build to sell in the next 3 to 5 years is now. We couldn't ask for a better opportunity. So I promised to answer the 5 questions. What makes you special? We spoke about what a brand experience is. It's not about great logos. Do not believe the top 100 brands awards in this country. It's all BS. Because when I look at the top 100 brands, it's banks, it's networks, mobile networks. And I'm not sure here who loves their mobile network or who loves their bank. But often, I think that those awards are really just directed to who's got the biggest ad spend. A brand is the lived reality, the felt experience of a customer that in meeting you feels heard and understood, in buying from you has a fulfillment experience that makes them feel safe and makes them understand the value that they've had in having a problem resolved. Next, how far into the future can you forecast? Well, if you have systems, a buyer says to you, okay, Kate, how far into the future can you forecast? And if you can show growth in the past, that growth going into the future would arguably give you a future forecast. The next question they ask you is, okay, but Kate, is that growth because of you, or is there another reason? If you're able to demonstrate that you've built a business driven by a system of delivery, business activities in a sequence that can be measured, with system operators, the right people doing the right thing at the right time, then you can present your argument and say, whether I'm there or not, Pavlo, this business can continue to operate. That positioning is achieved through a system of delivery, and I've got the right people doing the right thing at the right time. How much free cash flow does your business generate? If you have done what you ought to be doing as a CEO, not an ops manager in your own business, it's because you have found opportunities, the significant opportunities that you can take on and realize, knowing full well that when you bring them on board, you won't disrupt your operations. Because if you disrupt your operations, you get pulled back from the bridge, down into the engine room, and you find yourself in a sequence where every time you try to grow, you hit a level of chaos and complexity that stops and stalls the growth. It's almost like a roller coaster revenue ride. What is your role in the business? You need to be able to demonstrate to me that you're the captain on the bridge. When I buy businesses on behalf of our clients, I look very, very closely at, Soren, what you would do Monday to Friday. How do you spend your time? Where is your attention taken up? Let me see your emails. What kind of noise is in there? I look very carefully to understand whether the business is there because of you or in spite of you. And I know it may not be good for ego, but trust me, you want the business to be there in spite of you. And then finally, who will stay and who will go? People often work for a person. A good buyer understands that, and they look very carefully at that as a means to try and reduce the valuation of the business they hope to buy. What we have certainly found with all our clients is that when you put a square peg into a square hole, they stay. If I find work that resonates with me, that draws off my strengths, where I perform well and can produce good results, where I'm recognized in the work that I deliver, I want to stay there. It's natural. It's normal for all of us. And then finally, you've got the mathematics. This lets me look into the future and say, okay, Grant, I'm buying your business, and I can see why it should be a 3-year future without you, as opposed to a 1-year future. The further into the future we go, the higher the valuations. And when I look at the free cash being generated in the business, if I can see historically you've increased your revenues and you've contained your fulfillment costs, your operating overhead, into the future as the free cash flow seam gets thicker, I will buy that argument too. The third element about what makes you special impacts something we call the discount rate when you run the mathematics. If I can see that you have an advantage that's hard to emulate because it's not based on a product that any competitor could challenge eventually. It's not based on price, which is not a sustainable value proposition. And it's not based on this idea of service, whatever that might mean, but rather in the business you've built, you own a very well-defined segment, and that segment makes up a big market of opportunity that you're on your path to gaining dominance in. I'm going to reduce the risk rate of the business itself. And through that, I get my valuation on a maximized basis. So how do we work with you? Should we work together to build an asset of value? We first go through a dating process. Because it's kind of like a marriage. It's intimate. Kate, why are you smiling so much? It's an intimate process. The first thing we do is we meet and greet. We need to make sure that we have good chemistry together, because the nature of how we work is intimate. We work with each other through 3 2-hourly sessions a month. Practical, action-orientated, activity-driven. There's rich engagement, although nowadays we do it across screens. Second, In doing what we do, can we have an impact on your business? We understand what we do. We understand where we have capability and where we don't. We understand how to look at a business from the perspective of an asset of value and see what path we need to travel in order to get there. And in that engagement between each other, we then do an experience and gap analysis. If we clear that we believe we've got good chemistry with you, and we believe that in doing what we do, we can have an impact on your business, we then engage with you to understand whether you have the same experience of us. And we do a try before you buy experience. There's nothing academic in what we do. There's nothing interesting in what we do. We are artisans. We build with our hands. There's nothing training orientated in what we do. There's no consulting in what we do. There's no advice in what we do. Because trust me, nobody knows your business better than you do. We understand how to build an asset of value. You understand your business. And through that experience and understanding gaps in our understanding, we work to close your experience in your business with our understanding of how we can be of value to you, to get to a point where if we see and believe in each other that we can do better together, we then engage and we start. But we don't do it for free. So we've got 3 fees. We've got an onboarding fee, 9,500 Rand. We've got a monthly management fee of 6,500 Rand. And then the majority of our fees are based on turnover. We apply a percentage to turnover, anywhere from 0.1% to 1.5%. And what we seek to do is in the first 6 months of engagement, we invest heavily. We then moderate our investment for the remaining 9 months, with the last period of time that we work together all centered on growth. Because if we can get positioning right, build scale in the system of delivery, all our attention then points towards accelerated growth. And that's where we look to make our returns. In working with you, we run diagnostics for the first 2 months, detailed diagnostics on business systems, 207 activities that need to be in play for an asset of value, strategy diagnostics, numbers diagnostics, and team dynamics. Once we have that data, we then set the growth plan, customized around your circumstances and what you wish to achieve in the next 24 months. From there, we build a system of delivery, scale before growth. If the system of delivery is solid, once you're on the bridge and we start looking for accelerated growth, we know that you can remain on the bridge with us so we can continue to change and challenge accelerated growth without you being pulled back into operations. And then eventually, the focus relies entirely on deepening value. Because when you build to sell, it's that value gap, the distance between increased rates of turnover and increased rates of operating expenditure. You want that yawn to appear. And as that yawn appears, that is the indication that you've succeeded in the journey of building the asset of value. It sets you up for sale, should you wish to. And with that, I'm going to end. I really want to emphasize this point. In 6 months, businesses that invest strongly in growth now will maximize in the inevitable market upturn. It really is the time to do it. On the screen, I've got 2 books, Sweat Scale Sell, which talks in detail about how to build an asset of value, Reset, Rebuild, Reignite, which we're going to be releasing, I think, this week sometime. It's the latest book based on 60,000 businesses that we have been speaking to in South Africa, the United States, Europe, Singapore, and the United Kingdom, all through the period of COVID. It really talks to how you reset your business in the midst of a crisis to be relevant to clients and customers, how you rebuild it differently with the view to how you reignite it to make up the lost revenues that you might have experienced in the last 6 months. And with that, I would really like to open up for questions. I'm going to read through a couple of the questions I have over here on my chat to make sure that I definitely address them. It was the promise that I made to you. How do you attract and hold the right team when governments and big corporations offer so much more by way of remuneration, benefits, and other opportunities to go? Tandi, don't believe that for a minute. Don't believe that for a minute. There are very, very few happy people I know who work for government, and very, very few happy people that I know who work for corporate that you would want to employ, Increasingly, if you can provide people with meaning in work, and you can create a structure, from an Auric point of view, we've got a philosophy in Auric around everyone we employ. If you work for Auric, you can have your cake and you can eat it, but that is, my friend, you've got to bake it. We will give you the tools to create your own wealth through performance in the business itself. And we stick to that because we have system behind everything. We can measure everything. And we employ people based on their values as opposed to their experience. If we can find people whose values we believe in, and we think it makes a good fit in Auric, then it's uncapped in terms of what you can earn for yourself. So I do not believe that for a minute. There are very, very few people that I would necessarily want to employ coming out of corporate or government. It's very interesting. I had a big discussion about 2 years ago with two people on a very similar seminar like this. Both of them were working for SAA. Now, let me ask you, if somebody stuck around in SAA over the last 4 years, would you ever want that person in your business? Or the SABC? These are businesses that have been consistently on a path to failure, and the only people that have remained there are people who have no other options. You actually do yourself a disservice by sticking around in a failing business as an employee. So, no, I've got a very different view. You really don't want to take people out of corporate life to come into your environment. They mostly just struggle to cope. Yeah, I like your comment, Alex, and I agree with that. Increasingly, we've seen corporates disappoint people. In a corporate where the CEO is driven by quarter to quarter performance levels, it really means that when an economy struggles to grow, what's the first thing, and probably the only thing a CEO can do? And that really is to focus on cutting costs. And in that process, it's a pretty brutal place to be. There are very, very few people I know who are finding any form of safety or comfort in a corporate environment right now. Dominique, your comment, agreed. See if you can add other benefits like some additional leave or other flexibility or growth opportunities. Also create systems that allow for you to have staff for a maximum of 2 years. Now, that's a very interesting comment. About 5 years ago, I was put in a very difficult situation in Detroit where I was addressing an audience of about 350 people. And I made a comment over there saying that to be unemployed is in part a choice. Now, the United States is a very different environment to the South African environment. And what happened is some guy stood up and he said, I take great offense to what you said. His story was that his grandfather had worked for Ford Motor Corporation based out of Detroit. His father had worked for Ford Motor Corporation. And about 3 years before, he was made redundant because Ford established a plant in Mexico and they moved part of their facility onto the West Coast in California. And I turned around and I said to him, why are you offended? And he said, because my family was loyal to Ford all these years and I was made redundant. And when he explained the reasoning for his redundancy, I simply asked him a question and I said, but Jim, how did you make yourself constantly valuable to Ford? And he said, how would I have done that? And I said, by upskilling yourself, improving your skills and your capability. And he said, but Pavlo, I can't afford education. Now, guys, I've got to ask you, does education upskill you? Or does an industrious mindset that says, gosh, technology is playing a more and more important role in business, all business. I'm going to go into YouTube and look at a free course on how to use social media, or how to work LinkedIn, or how to code in Python. Surely it's our responsibility to make ourselves relevant in a constantly changing world. The pace of change has accelerated. It's not going to slow down. And certainly from an Auric point of view, what we do, which I would recommend all of you to do, is every Monday, with parts of our team, we have learning sessions. And we take learnings from members of our team coming out of the UK and South Africa, and that learning is shared. And people have an option to be there. Because my understanding is, certainly from a business owner's perspective, I will invest in growth and I will go for growth in every instance possible. I will help train you to the extent that I can, but you too need to train yourself. We need to start changing the conversation with our teams, because you want people on board with a growth mindset. It'll spur your growth. How does one begin a process of building to sell without worrying the work team that you are selling the business and their jobs from under them? You know, Mike, it's a tough question because it depends very much on the type of culture you built in your organization. Here's the thing. There've been a lot of questions around how can you have a growth mindset when you're struggling to survive? Get rid of the word survive. Because if the attitude says I need to survive, what most of us will do is cut back on everything. If the attitude in a crisis is we want to thrive, we will still cut back smartly, but we will have a growth mindset from the morning to the evening, 365 days of the year. And that growth mindset, because you're thinking growth, you are seeing opportunities for growth. You're not seeing problems, you're seeing puzzles to growth. It creates an industrious mindset. It creates flexibility in your mind. And those conversations with your team consistently generate a self-fulfilling prophecy around growth in its own right. And if you're growing, you might well be wanting to exit. And in having that conversation with your team, it opens the door for them to thrive, because they sit in one of the few businesses in this country that are growing. So it's very hard to say, I want to build to sell, if you've communicated and behaved in a negative way within your own business in this very difficult period. It's a switch of mindset, and it is remarkable how infectious it becomes with the rest of your team. That if you say we are doing what we are doing to thrive, and to take advantage of the fact that we will be one of the few businesses standing at the end of this terrible period that we're going through as a species, as an economy globally. That builds up confidence, that builds up fervor, that builds up motivation. On top of it, if people have got jobs based on systems that they are running, and they are doing well in those systems, the growth opportunity that comes along for them is either to look at acquiring you out of your company through a management buyout, or should they be bought in the selling process. I can promise you, if they're performing well at what they do, they are safe in their own jobs. I'm stuck in the engine room, Murray. We don't have the profit or cash reserves to employ people to get me out the engine room. I need to simplify our product offering so that the engine room is simpler. Spot on, mate. That is 100% correct. It's been very interesting looking at how people have responded in this crisis. Everyone bought this word called pivot, which is an American word, mostly. It originated out of the west coast of the US. Pivot is a viable strategy for startup businesses. It's not a viable strategy for established businesses. Pivot in the US says, I thought that this was the right direction for my business, but I'm going to pivot it because now I've learned that there's a different direction for me. The way people have understood pivot is, I run a restaurant business. I'm in dire straits because of the lockdown 5, lockdown 4, lockdown 3. I'm now going to move into the hand sanitizer business. That never ever draws off your strength. It doesn't draw off your supply chain. It doesn't draw off your customers. It doesn't draw off your own knowledge and insight. That's not pivoting. That's heading to an iceberg as the captain of a ship. In Reset, Rebuild, Reignite, I share a strategy called the onion peeler on how to look at your business and understand what is core and strategic to your purpose and how to hold on to that. And when you have to cut costs, you don't cut in the center of the onion, core and strategic. You do not cut. You cut in the middle layer of the onion. Non-core activities, but strategic to your business. And you cut in the outer layer of the onion. Things in your business that are non-core and non-strategic. That is the growth mindset. When you hold on to what it is that makes you valid in the lives of your customers and you understand that clearly, you cut back to that level in order to regrow again. We should be doing it in any event every 3 years, crisis or no crisis. And guys, with that, I'm looking at the time. I've gone 17 minutes over. I do apologize for that. I hope it was valuable to you. I hope I've answered most of the questions that have been put forward. What we will be doing is sending you a thank you email for attending. We'll put a copy of the presentation together. And I've no doubt, and I certainly hope, we have a chance to engage in the very, very near future. So thank you very much for making time available, and I look forward to seeing you on the other side. 2 last thoughts. If any of you are looking for funding, we created a fund for our clients. And if any of you are thinking of export into developed economies, we have started to create access through our business in the United Kingdom to leverage the rand in terms of costs and enjoy the pound in terms of revenues. So please let's engage. And I certainly look forward to seeing some of you, meeting some of you, hopefully face to face in the next couple of months, depending on what we're allowed to do and not allowed to do. Thanks again. Oh, read Sweat Scale Sell, read Reset, Rebuild, Reignite. I promise you, you'll get bang for buck. All very practical, no theory, and apparently they make good reads. Thanks, everyone.